Welcome to an all-new episode of Get Lit with Lianna, the podcast. Join me as I sit down with a new guest author in each episode to discuss their books, careers, and everything in between. Welcome, Michelle Ruiz, to the podcast. I am so excited to have you on. You are the contributing editor at Vogue. You're a freelance journalist, and you are one of the reasons why I found the book, The Idea of You. I don't know if you know this piece of the story, but in COVID, I had a back and forth relationship with reading my entire life. I always read, but I was mostly like a vacation reader. I wasn't really like an all the time kind of reader. And when COVID hit and I had so much time on my hands as everyone else did, I was looking for books to read, romance books to read. And I was in one kind of Facebook group, and someone in this Facebook group linked to The Idea of You as a Sleeper Hit of a Pandemic article.
No.
And I was like, okay, I'm intrigued. And then someone else had mentioned the book, and I was like, okay, I'm going to read this article. And I started reading the article, and I was like, I think I have to read this book immediately. So you are part of the reason why I fell in love with the book of The Idea of You 4 years ago now. And I know you love it just as much as me. And we've had many conversations online as to why we adore this book. But I'm so excited to have you here. And I feel like you're the perfect person to have on this episode to debunk and kind of go through our thoughts on the adaptation, because I don't think there's anyone on planet Earth who adores this book the way that you do and I do. I think we're two of a kind. Yes.
Yes, we're psychos, and we wear that as an honor.
100%.
We wear that term proudly. I do. Yes, I'm crazy for the book. Thank you so much for having me. I can't believe that. But I'm happy to be a Pied Piper for this book forever. Yeah. I love it so much. I value it so much. And I feel like that's something that I'm focusing on as it is referred to as fan fiction or kind of filtered into a rom-com, which I love rom-coms, but just truly the importance of this story. And I see it as a really important, meaningful story about a 40-year-old woman finding herself, her independence, her sexuality. And I think it can be demeaned as fan fiction, even though fan fiction can be great. It's just not what this is. Mm-hmm. But I think, yes, I am a psycho for this story, and I value it so much.
Yes, we both are. We both definitely do. I know that you wrote another article for Vogue once the film came out, kind of top line thoughts about the film from your POV. I know you were one of the lucky people who saw the film a few months back, so you've had time to sit with this and digest it and kind of process what this is. I mean, for someone like me, I only saw it Thursday morning bright and early, so I'm still relatively new to this exposure. I mean, I've watched it 4 times, but I still feel as though I'm in the processing and the mourning stage of this movie. I'm kind of just wondering, top line, if you had to just say what you think about this adaptation before we go into it. How did you feel the first time watching it?
So the first time I watched it was probably this winter. Amazon Prime or Prime Video sent it to me. I think because of that article that I wrote about Robin in the book, they wanted to have me see it. And I knew it was going to be a tough sell for me always, because I love the book ferociously, and for any movie to compare to your imagination and your casting in your mind, that's hard and a tall order. But then we did have that little preview of knowing if initially they changed Saleem's name to Sophie, and they were meeting at Coachella, and they made Hayes older. So we had some inklings of changes and I know the fandom of which we are members sort of were bristling at those changes. So I had a little inkling, and I knew it was always going to be a tough sell for me. When I saw it in my bed on my laptop, I viscerally disliked it. Viscerally disliked it, and went and saw a screening again, because that was a long time ago. And I thought, before I write about this, and I was like, maybe that's mostly my initial reaction and my initial knee-jerk opposition to this. And so I went and saw it again at a screening in New York, maybe a few weeks ago. And I did laugh, even though I wasn't supposed to be, I think, laughing. I laughed at a few things more so at that screening. Like I laughed, we'll get back to the art, like when they're marveling at this art that looked like something that my 7-year-old son
Yeah.
scribbled on.
Yeah.
I was like busted out laughing. But mainly, like my main opposition held true, which is the diminishing of Selene as a really sort of independent, intelligent, powerful, heavy hitting woman. And I also take major issue with the recasting of Black characters and characters of color with white actors. Those two things sort of stood out to me when I first saw it, and they stood out to me now, where I feel like this story was so powerful because it was about this 40-year-old woman rediscovering herself, going on this sexy affair. She was self-possessed and self-assured and successful. And then in the film, they had to sort of make her smaller in every way. She had to be cheated on. She had to have a one-room gallery that this man cleared out in 5 seconds. She's way more insecure. She's talking to herself in the mirror. And I just resent that must have been felt that we had to make her smaller to make her more palatable.
100%. When I was watching the movie, because I'm someone that like is a sucker for seriously any love story, like whether it ends in tragedy or like kicking feet bliss, I will eat it up with a fork and spoon and like lick the plate clean. So the movie starts and it's like the poppy Maggie Rogers song that I've been obsessed with for years. And I'm like, interesting. And automatically like the tone of this is completely different than the opening of the book, right? Like the entire time, I mean, I've read this book a sick amount of times, an embarrassing amount of times. And like, as much as it's a love story and I'm like ooey gooey, so ready to like be obsessed with these characters, the underneath tone of the entire book is rather somber. It's rather sad. You know, her internal dialogue, Selene's internal dialogue the entire time is very conflicted, knowing how this is going to end because it can't end any other way. And I just thought that right off the bat, it was very interesting how it's very bright colors. They're using this poppy Maggie Rogers song. I was immediately like, okay, I can already tell this is the route we're going in. And going into the movie, I knew, just like you knew, with all these changes we had heard about during pre-production with the name changes, the Coachella, the age changes, Izzy, the daughter's age change, it wasn't going to be the same. But I just found how like right off the bat, they kind of established that it wasn't going to be the same. And from that moment and kind of even before the movie started, I went into it thinking like, I have to look at this not as an adaptation of this book, because if I'm looking at it as an adaptation, I'm going to be disappointed. So I was like, I'm going to look at it as something that was like inspired by the idea of you. Like everyone's throwing around the fan fiction term, say what you will about what you think Robin created Hayes from and what, like I've had many conversations with Robin. I know where the inspiration came from, but say what you will of you want to call this a fanfic, even though it's not, whatever. But like, I don't know. I was just like, maybe this could be like a fan fiction of the idea of you book. Like maybe that's what this movie is. And I was going through the motions of watching the movie and I found myself totally like enamored with the film. And I was not even associating it with the book. And the exact moment where that kind of switched was the first time in the movie Selene breaks up with Hayes when they're in the south of France. And that doesn't happen in the book. And I was like, okay, now I hate it because they're like actually like countering the book. Like it's one thing if you're going to do entirely different story, but to take elements of the book and then do it completely different, that's where I like had an issue. And then I just went on the grieving experience where I was literally like mourning the book while watching it. I walked out, I finished the movie. I was watching it also in my bed so early in the morning. I came out here, my husband was lying on the couch and he was like, okay, so I've been talking about this for fucking 3 years.
Right. It's the Super Bowl.
Literally the Super Bowl of anything romance related, whatever you will say about the book not being a romance, but love story related. And my husband's like, okay. And I'm like, no, like, and I just start sobbing. And he was like, you need to film yourself. Like, this is an insane gut reaction. So I like filmed myself standing here crying. And then I was like, but the thing is, I didn't hate the movie. I just hated it as the adaptation of this book. And I hated it that this is the one shot we get to see this book on screen and they completely fucking failed. That was where
it could have been so good.
It could have been so good.
Yeah. I'm curious to go back to that scene really quick. Do you know what really bothered you? Why was it that scene, do you think? Was it her like insecurity in that moment, or because I didn't isolate that scene in my piece either, but then I think we came back to it on our own where it was when she was wrapping herself up in this denim
Yes.
caftan.
Yes.
And it was not believable because here stands like Anne Hathaway, who is conventionally fitting society's expectations of beauty. You know, she's like a thin white woman. And just the fact that she's like, I couldn't possibly go out by this pool in a one piece, I thought was so pathetic and it just felt like a Kathy comic. And it felt like a white director's filtration of what a woman would feel in that moment. And it's like,
100%.
guess what? I'm 42 and I would not feel that. I would go out in my one piece and I would kind of love my life in that minute. But God forbid that was.
Yes.
But that I'm getting away from my question to you, which was why that scene bothered you.
I think because it was the first real scene, aside from all the other superficial things like Selene driving a Subaru she would never, and her house being this like messy bungalow style thing. Like, yeah, the fridge with the spoiled food, her one room gallery, like none of it was Selene tracking. And I was like, okay, you know what? It's just not her. Like they're changing it for the screen. But then when it was like this fundamental piece of her like being so self-conscious, which she would never be in the book, and like rearranging her boobs in that stunning bathing suit. Like that's a stunning bathing suit. It had this like it had like this like jewel embellishment on it. It was like literally a gorgeous bathing suit. And then like him being so vulnerable and like basically begging her to stay and apologizing and her just being like, no. And it's not like you can get the inner dialogue or monologue from her kind of like thinking like of what is she thinking in that moment. You're kind of just taking it for face value of her just purely rejecting him and being kind of over it. And I was like, I can't relate. I can't resonate with this. And it's just so off brand from the book. But to go kind of back to like what you just said about how it's very clearly like the white director that kind of, I guess, like put this kind of filter on Selene. It kind of also goes back to that stupid fucking scene at the beginning of her 40th birthday where all of these like curmudgeon-y yucko men are hitting on her. And it's like, this is obviously a commentary of what people in their 40s, women in their 40s think they need to settle for when they are divorced or if they're still single and 40 and they're dealing with men who are still married, pretending that they're not, or men who are weirdo science teachers living in a basement with a million odd pets. Like, but that's not the case. Like, that's not an accurate representation of like real life. So I just felt there were multiple moments leading up to, I guess, this like climax moment for me, I guess, where I was just like, it's just not right. Like, it's kind of diminishing everything that the book set out to do in one fell swoop.
Yes, that's how I feel. And I think that scene, I think it seems like Michael Showalter, being from a comedy background, tried to bring those comedic moments in, and that was one of them. But it was sort of like life doesn't have to be so droll for us to like her or think this is a cool story. And I think what it did was it took a story that's rare and special because it's subversive, even though it probably shouldn't be, but it still is. And it made it into something just more expected and dull and boring. You know what I mean? So it's like, how many times have we seen that scene? How many times have you seen a scene of a divorced 40 or 40 something woman who's at a party roster, rolling through sad date options?
Yeah.
It's been done 1,000 times.
Yes.
And that's the opposite of what this book is. It's the opposite of a 40-year-old woman getting with a hot 20-year-old man. Society expectations be damned.
100%. And I think that kind of also goes into like what we've seen before a million times in romance, which is like the C-list best friend character who has 5 lines and doesn't add anything to the plot. And that was obviously the Tracy character in the book.
In
the movie. I'm just like not understanding the decision to remove Lulit entirely and not like, first of all, I know you mentioned at the beginning, the major issue here is like the whitewashing of the actual characters in the book. Like Georgia, one of Izzy's best friends is a Black young girl in the book. This is not the case in the movie at all. Like, I'm just not really understanding why that decision was made, especially the elimination of Lulit's character. I feel like she was so fundamental to understanding like Selene as a professional, never mind just like Selene as
Yeah.
a woman and like Selene as a friend. And we get none of that from Tracy. Her lines aren't even that like I just don't really understand what the point really was in that creative decision. And even like to add to these like weird creative decisions, like having Izzy be older, I understand for the context of the movie why they made her older, but like for the fundamental part of the book, it makes no sense. Like the whole heartbreak in the book is the fact that Selene is crushing her daughter's heart. Like think about like I think about it all the time. Like when I was 13, like the boys I was obsessed with. Like if my mom was dating a fantasy boy to me, like
Who would it be?
I
Who are you
honestly
obsessed
like
with?
what I can't even like think right now. Like when I was
One
13,
Direction?
like I wasn't even that big into One Direction. I guess I was like big into like the Jonas Brothers, but I was a weirdo
Sleeping
kid.
with Joe Jonas. It would
Yeah,
have
no,
been
like
upsetting.
crushing, soul crushing. And
Yeah.
like making Izzy in the
Yeah.
movie 16 and having her not be into August Moon anymore and having her never had a thing for Hayes and it was always Rory, which is so fucking dumb. Like it totally changes the stakes. It lowers the stakes of the relationship, which is the entire and like the entire like meat of the book is that the stakes are so fucking high for her, like for Selene. Like she's risking her relationship with her daughter and absolutely crushing her daughter. She's risking her professional relationships with other artists, with her gallery, with her name that she took so long to build. Like the stakes are so goddamn low in the movie that it's almost like she's just throwing this away for a sexual relationship and attraction. Like you don't even feel that there's anything deeper between Selene and Hayes, which is another freaking problem I found because, like, in the book, Selene and Hayes, obviously, it starts as like a physical attraction, the banter, all of that. But it turns into such a deeper connection. Like, there has to be something about Selene that keeps Hayes wanting more and vice versa. And like, for Hayes being so young, there needs to be more depth to him, more understanding of what someone of Selene's caliber and stature and respect in the world would she feel attracted to someone like Hayes, right? And you get none of that in the movie, zero, which was just crazy to me too.
Completely agree. I think it's very strange because there's a lot of people, there's some people who are in our fan group who are like, I love the movie. I love the movie. It's a separate thing. It was only 2 hours and you can only do so much. But I'm like, I get how adaptations work. You change things for space. You cut things for smoothness. Like you edit, you eliminate a character because there's no time for it. Obviously, you're not going to have every single one of those tour stops in this movie. But the changes don't serve the story. I thought that a million times with everything you just said. They killed conflict at every turn. So Lulit was awesome. She was just that best friend, like who was at first like, go get your rock star. And then later, as the gallery is getting graffitied and shit's hitting the fan, she's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like, where is this going? Which everybody needs that, no matter what, if they're making these decisions, these kind of teetering on the edge kind of decisions, you need that person. Same with making Izzy older. I felt that it also, the more I thought about that, I thought it was so weird. And I think they totally did it because I think they thought that she'd be a terrible person if she was, in fact, sleeping with the person that her daughter had a poster on her wall of and she was obsessed with. And it's so funny as you're thinking that, I'm like, if my mom was sleeping with Donnie Wahlberg, like in the 90s, when I had like a New Kids pillow, I would have been apoplectic. And
Yeah.
is a huge source of conflict, and she keeps it a secret. And I thought it was so weird because the Izzy actor is 22 and she looks 22, not in a bad way. She's a beautiful, lovely looking girl, but it's like she's calling Daniel being like, can I please say goodnight to Izzy? It's like, she's not 6. She's literally 16 years old. And the longevity of the relationship, that didn't work either because it was like, look, 16 and she's going into her senior year, like tomorrow, you could begin dating him within the year.
Yeah.
And she's going to college and it's fine. Like the whole point was that you have a 13-year-old and this man's 20 and it's at least 5 years before you could feasibly date this man with your daughter in the mix.
Mm-hmm.
And I think making Hayes older, you said another one where it would just made it duller, less bold, less subversive for her to be dating a 24-year-old than a 20-year-old. We couldn't let her like really dance on the edge. He had to be a little older to bring him into the realm of acceptability. And I thought he was super goofy. I mean, I think he did fine with the material he was given, but for some reason, this chicken finger singing scene, like, of course, you're gonna have silly moments together when you're having a love affair, but I didn't feel like he didn't have that sort of charm, and he wasn't on her level at all. When he says, this is another thing I was thinking of this morning, when he says, and you're hot or whatever.
Never. He would never.
That's not it.
He would
A, he would
never.
never say it.
Never.
And B, is that going to get a sophisticated 40-year-old woman to sleep with you? You're hot or whatever. We're going to need a little more than that.
Exactly. But I mean, maybe crunchy movie Selene, it worked for her.
It worked for her. It worked for, I guess, the screenwriters to think that that would be enough.
Yeah.
And I think that is honestly insulting. It's pathetic. Like, it takes more than that.
I fully agree. And like, kind of to also add to the whole screenwriter thing and the you're hot or whatever, like there was so much epic banter in the book that easily could have been pulled into the movie that would just elevate it a bit more. Like when they're in the
copy
gallery,
paste it.
No, it's not even like, it's honestly flabbergasting to me. Cause like, for example, the scene when they're in that, I don't even know where, warehouse garage thing, looking at the art. Okay. Let's call a spade a spade.
My son's art. Yeah.
Literally, my like best friend's 1-year-old in daycare is making the same kind of beautiful. Anyway, when he says like, should we go get a bite? Why couldn't you just start pulling out like all like the lunch banter? Like, why couldn't we use, say what you will about re-scening the entire thing and it not being in the lavish hotel in Beverly Hills or whatever, like fine, change that, do what you want. But why not pull some of the dialogue, some of that epic banter and make it just a bit more elevated? And what's really funny to me is I'm now just completely on the Idea of You movie TikTok. That's all I see when I scroll.
Oh, really? I haven't been in there.
Oh my God, it's all I see. And I have to say the scenes that I'm seeing over and over and over again are the scenes that are coming verbatim from the book. So I'm seeing like the meeting, like them meeting when he goes like your daughter, not when he goes your ex-husband, or what does he say? He goes your father's daughter, not your husband.
Right.
That like that's verbatim from the book, and that's a scene that's going viral. Yes, and like that second weird confrontation between Izzy and Selene in the car when she basically is like, they want to know, my friends want to know if you have a picture of Hayes's penis. And then she goes, wait, they said that. And she's like, no, they said dick. Like that whole conversation verbatim from the book. Like those are the scenes I feel like that are really striking a chord with people, that people are like, ooh, this is like really well done. And I'm like, those are the book scenes. That's not the screen. Like that's not the screenwriter's work. They literally just, why couldn't we have had more of that? There's so much.
I think that's such a good point. You lift it. It's all right there. And I think there are definitely so many other books that used the book to movies that used the source material so much more. And I think that's such a good point. The one that stood out for me that I think was from the book that I thought that really worked, even though they were crying over sandwiches and fixing spoiled food from a broken fridge, which is like the opposite of arousing. I think she says, like, I could be your mother. And he's like, you're not. And she's like, but she could be. And he's like, but you're not. Like, that was so, I think, right? Wasn't that one from the book? Like, that felt so book Robin to me. And even though the context of that date, I think, was abysmal, that dialogue sort of saved that moment. I think their chemistry is actually also pretty good. And that dialogue saved that moment. And I did remember thinking in that moment, just use Robin's words.
And even like
and I think, we wish she had been at a liberty to probably write this screenplay, right? Because the book wrote circles around this. And so it's just kind of sad to see the quality of the writing dip so much.
Yeah. And there was an interview, I don't know if you saw it, that Anne Hathaway did about how she read the screenplay and then she read the book, and she was like, these two can't mirror each other. It needs to be like a different story. It needs to go a different way, but we want to appease the fans. So we're going to pull in a lot of very key moments. Did you see this interview?
I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't. Do you remember where it was? Which one it was?
With Entertainment. It was one of the junkets.
So much.
Like it was one of like the junket days. I think it was with Entertainment Tonight. Okay. And it's actually a great interview because I feel like the interviewer could have been like a hazelnut. I just feel like she's kind of like curious about the actual work that went into adapting from book to screen. But what's really interesting is Anne's response to like, what are you hoping like the fans take away. She goes, well, we worked really hard at implementing key things from the book. She goes, like the Tag Heuer watch. Like I would be really upset if there was no mention of Tag Heuer. And she goes, and unclothe
Sure.
me. She goes, and unclothe me. Like we worked really hard at finding an artist. And I just was like, okay, the Tag
How
Heuer.
is this possible?
The Tag Heuer
How is
watch.
it possible regarding
like,
art?
what are those two like reference points to you as like the most important? Like to me, those are like unclothe me 100%. But like, why not incorporate things that like the fans are still obsessing over? Like, I don't know about you, but when I'm like in the Facebook groups and people are reading the books, like, and messaging me on Instagram, like nobody's talking to me about Tag Heuer and nobody's talking to me about like unclothe me. Like people are being like, okay, the dining room table scene, you know, or people are being like, or like the south of France or Japan. Like I'm getting comments and like overwhelming responses to pivotal moments that like mean something to the fans that are reading the book in real time. And like, I just feel she took like the two most basic rom-com-y, easy pieces of this book to translate to screen and just like took the easy way out almost. And like, it's insulting as a fan of the book to hear her be like, these are the things that I, as a fan of the book, would love to see on screen, and I'm doing it. And it's like, but you didn't. You completely missed the mark.
Totally. And I think like, yeah, having those in there, great, good. But I go back to the spirit of the changes and why were those changes made? And all of the changes track as making this woman less self-assured, less independent, less of herself.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of like, Tag Heuer, watch me all day long. But you had to diminish this woman in order to put her on a streaming
Yeah.
service. And I just feel that it it was all there for the taking, and it could have been so good. And I almost like don't even want to think about it. It could have been so good, even though there's only 2 hours. Even if you're cutting out a lot of those tour stops, it could have been really, really magical. And it's so interesting to think about all the ways they had to dim her.
Yes.
And it feels very predictably Hollywood. It's depressing in that regard. And I think it's interesting you mentioned the sex, because I didn't touch on that, but I thought about it more. And it was like, look, this book was teeming with rich, deftly written sex scenes that were incredible. And I think the movie, again, like I like joked, I was like, look, if this is going to be a very faithful adaptation, it would be an X-rated French film that I would definitely watch and love. But okay, of course you're not going to have every one of those sex scenes in there. And maybe you're not going to have them be as explicit or graphic. More than like the hotel scene, or why not have that dining table scene that was so pivotal? And there was really just that one sex scene in the beginning where they were at the hotel where, of course, Anne Hathaway's character, Selene, is satisfied within like 90 seconds.
Oh,
amazing message to
me and my sister-in-law were watching, like it was her third time, my fourth time. And we were just looking at each other and we were like, in what fucking world? Like it's annoying. It's annoying.
And then you're on the tour route, and that was like a montage. But you're on the tour route, like, why not have some other sex scenes? Why not have like a more intimate feeling sex scene? Not the like, this is our first time sex scene. Why not then have a few more that are like, whoa, this is intense, it's getting serious, they're really into each other. You know, sex scenes serve a purpose narratively. 100%. And they're demeaned and written off and glossed over. But like, we know this from the book. Again, is what just pisses me off. It's like a story written by a woman for women that is very sexual, that is very sort of bold, although it shouldn't be, had to be like edited and dulled.
100%. Like, why couldn't they have like made him comment on her mouth? Like, that's such a big thing in the book. Like, there's so much material there that like, if you don't, let's say you don't want to put sex on screen as explicitly as in the book, fine. There's so many other ways to like up the chemistry and up the tension and kind of show the viewers like that the attraction is really there aside from just the one sex scene. And I feel like it was such a missed opportunity. But to go back to what you said about how they were really like diminishing Selene on screen, I feel like two things that we didn't talk about yet that were like absolutely critical to me, and I can't believe both of them were omitted / changed. The first, her being French when they meet, and Hayes is like, French, it's a French name. And she's like, French grandparents, like blowing it off. Why just curious, couldn't she be French? Like, why couldn't she be like, elaborate in the way she does in the book? Like, yes, like my parents are French. We're from France, grew up go vacationing in the south of France. Like, why couldn't we add that element of like cultural diversity a bit to her? Like, say what you will, but why couldn't that be part of her story? So that's one part that I take major umbrage with. The other being the whole reason of her divorce. Like in the book, she gets divorced because her husband wants her to be a stay-at-home mom, a PTA mom, not to continue to pursue her career. And that is not fulfilling enough for her. And she has all these desires and wants, as every woman should who wishes that they could. And her light is being dimmed by her husband, and she chooses what's best for her and puts herself first and decides to leave a marriage that's no longer serving her. As hard as that is for her and her child, she puts herself first. And that speaks so much to her character. And then in this book, in the movie rather, sorry, she's divorced because she was cheated on. She was willing to turn a blind eye to the cheating for the sake of her family. Selene in the book would never. She's so meek and complimentary and fine with the woman he cheated on her with, like doesn't snap back, drives her daughter over there all the time. Like she's just so agreeable and so like passive and meek. And that is just so not Selene's character. And I'm not really sure why that change was made for the screen. I don't find that really like, I guess it added to the narrative of the Selene they created for the screen, which is this small woman, but I don't really know why you had to make someone so big in the book, so small in the screen. I don't really get the choice.
That's the essence of it for me. And that change really pissed me off. I think that change was so critical because the book, the fact that she was initiating and I kind of went back to try to, read that part, but I think it was like, it was like she, right, as you're saying, she wasn't being supported. He didn't support her career. He wanted her to stay home. She wanted to like launch this gallery and follow her dream, her creative dream. And I think that's real. There's all of these actual memoirs coming out right now about women writers who sort of initiated their divorces. It's not, and I think instead they defaulted to this trope of he cheated on her with a younger woman at work. And here's that younger kind of ditzy blonde woman, which by the way, in the book, Eva was a half Dutch, half Chinese woman. And so now she's also a white blonde woman. Why? Because I guess that's just how we're going to play this. And the fact that she's on her first date with a hot man, sandwich with a broken fridge, and literally essentially crying about being cheated on. I just think it's like, why? Why do we have to do her like that? Why does she have to be broken or victimized in that way? When that wasn't what the source material called for. Why can't we allow her to have had the agency to say, this marriage isn't working for me? There are other ways for her to have ended up single than having to be cheated on in this expected way by a smarmy husband. And I think it just made such an unexpected story so much more expected and done.
For sure. I'm so curious what you think about all of the concert scenes. Like, what did you think about them? Because I feel like we're going to have actually polarizingly different opinions on this. I know we actually will, but I want to hear what you think.
So I didn't mind them.
Oh, okay.
That was not, I think everything that we're talking about on like a philosophical level was more my beef.
Okay.
I didn't mind the song that's like, I let my guard down. I don't want to sing in this podcast, but that one, or it's like, before we walk, didn't mind it. Is that what it was? Like, I did not mind it. I think the concert scenes were okay. I think the dancing was kind of bad, but I was like, all right, I'll let it slide. Like One Direction didn't dance. Boy bands don't have to be in sync level dancers.
Yeah.
And I didn't really dig too much into it. It was funny though, because then I was listening to, I think, Pop Culture Happy Hour, which I love on NPR. And they're such, pop culture savants that they were like, what era is this band in? Why would they be headlining Coachella? And if anything, that would be a reunion show. And I didn't mind the music. I didn't mind the concert scenes. I minded that in the south of France, 40 was like, what? You played me during that scene? It's like, she would know that.
Yes.
I mean,
yes. loved the music. But I'm also so like obsessed with pop music, like really obsessed. And I loved One Direction back in the day. Like I wasn't obsessed with them in the sense that like I was like, I had like a favorite and like whatever, but like I loved the music when it came on. And now in my older years, actually like listening back to it, I think it's just like so
I love
happy
the
and
music.
poppy. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I love the concert scenes also because my whole life, like my fantasy has been to marry a pop star, like a rock star. Like I am obsessed with all rock star romances for real in every sense. And when she lived that like side stage dream being on tour and like he walked over to her, this is my actual favorite fucking scene because this is fine with me because it has nothing to do with the book. So like I'm gonna live in the movie moment for a moment. But
Hmm.
like when he's walking over to her during the montage scene during that taste song, and he says he's singing the word to her, like, you're such a masterpiece. And he does that thing with his finger where he like tells her to twirl and she twirls. I was like, hot, 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 hot. This is so fucking
Yes.
hot. And this is a
Yes.
fucking dream. And who wouldn't want that? And like that just like was icing on the cake for me. I think I've watched that scene 1.5 million times. And I was like, if there's gonna be one redeeming moment of this book, aside from the first kiss, which I thought was so goddamn steamy and I could be your mother, but you're not, but you could be
Yeah, that was good.
like that whole part, those two moments for me, I was just like, okay, like I understand the appeal of like the movie part of it. Like this is I'm getting swept away in it. So I really did like the music part of it, but it just to me again, it like doesn't align in my head with the idea of you book. Like I don't know what I pictured August Moon to sound like or what it to be like, but like I just didn't picture this, I guess, if that makes sense. Like it just doesn't align or correlate properly in my brain.
I think that hypothesis as to why you like that moment so much, and I like that moment too. Now that you're bringing it back up, I think it's because it was fantasy, it was fantastical, which the book is that all the way through, and that's alluring, and it's fun, and it's escapist, and that moment gave you those feelings.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of the rest of the book is like you have a broken fridge, you're in your Craftsman, driving a Subaru, middle of row of the airplane. Like give us
Yes.
that fantasy
Yes.
because it's fun and it's rich and it's like how many male characters on screen are there that are crushing it at their jobs and like living in a gorgeous house in the hills, and like why can't she have that? Why can't we have
Yeah.
that? And that moment was like, right, that's your actual fantasy, and seeing that is so just delightful.
Yeah, it is. And then I was also like snapped back to reality after that scene where my thought was like, okay, but in the book, the only reason why she's like on all of these tour dates or like why she's around the world is like she's going for work and it just happens to correlate with his tour dates. It's not like she's following him around like a little puppy and being whisked around and being bought all these clothes. Like that scene when she's trying on all the clothes and Izzy calls her from camp and it's just like all the Celine clothes and the purses and all that. And just like she would have that on her own and she wouldn't be needing Hayes' stylist to dress her. Like there were just so many moments of this where I was just like, it's so missing the point, and it would be so easy to do those little tweaks to make it the book, like for her to be in Miami for Art Basel, like
Right.
it doesn't have to be that she's following him around. Like why couldn't it be the actual book where it's like she has this big adventurous, fancy, busy life and it just happens, dates happen to link up in the way they do in the book where they could be in these far off places together at the same time. Like I just felt that the decisions that were made through and through to adapt this to the screen were cheap.
So cheap. And I think that was both unrealistic, and I'm always happy to suspend disbelief. I actually kind of hate when people nitpick books and movies and are like, that wouldn't happen in real life. I'm like,
Yeah.
well, it's not real life. It's a fictional world. Just let it go. But I
Yeah.
think I am doing that to this book because to this movie because I feel like the same. A lot of the changes are so cheapening. And one of those was like him walking in, buying out her inventory in 5 minutes, and then being like, you have no inventory, so you can come on tour with me. In fact, like, I no,
Yeah.
absolutely not.
Yeah.
That would be so demeaning. And I think who is co-signing that? Like what woman is like, yeah, I worked so hard to have this eponymously self-owned gallery
Yeah.
and I'm just going to abandon it because I have zero stock because a rock star, a pop star just bought it all. And so
Yeah.
I'm out of here. I'm just going to penny lane with him everywhere
Literally.
at 40. Like
Literally.
like that to me is way more. I think it's funny because I think like I'm picturing like Hollywood, like a sinister like Hollywood executive with a cigar being like, no way can she be successful and have a huge awesome contemporary art gallery that is known around the world. She's got to have a one-room crunchy gallery and he's got to buy out her stuff. It's like, in fact, that's not realistic. And we don't relate to that.
Yeah.
And that's not what like someone of any age actually is going to say, yeah, I buy that. And I think that's really cool. I can see myself just completely erasing myself and my ambitions in the name of this like man in his and that scene. I have to note his outfit because we didn't talk about that.
No, it's
and
terrible.
I didn't really zero it out on my piece either. I kind of was like thinking about ideas and not about these elements. But that outfit, also Pan, it's a gaucho. I don't know what you would call it, but it's terrible.
No, it's a gaucho.
What is that?
A horrible hat. I don't know why the hat with the fuzzy jacket like that. The
a lot of cardigans on him, a lot of cardigans. And I will say, not to take us to this place, but I guess I've seen some photos of this maybe or something, but when we're 5 years in the future and he has a little soul patch, I was like,
no,
would this be what he would have in 2029? Like a Kevin Richardson's from Backstreet Boys style patch?
Why?
Like,
Why was that needed?
That black dyed hair, like, is this what we're going to look like in the future? Because I'm not thinking about that as feasible.
No, I agree. And I don't really understand the like hair and makeup techniques used to age someone. Like I feel as though that should have been reevaluated. But honestly, thrilled you brought up the soul patch because I would love to talk about the end of the movie. I would love to talk about the end of the movie because there's so many things about it that I found interesting. Firstly, I just don't really understand the whole Hayes had to go to New York for an emergency for Oliver. We never know what the emergency is. It's never resolved. That's never brought up again. I don't really understand that. That choice was interesting to me. Like, why couldn't they say what he was going to do or at least wrap it up? I just felt there was a lot of like loose ends in that sense. I was the entire time watching the movie, even knowing how the book ends, I was kind of like, this actually, I'm curious. Like, where did he go? Because in the book, he doesn't go to help Oliver in any way. Like,
and Oliver's another source of conflict, to your point, that was just completely diminished.
Eliminated. Yeah.
Oliver's sort of machinations and the way he would like triangulate between Hayes and Selene was this. I loved, I mean, I like morbidly loved that. And it really actually creeped me out and like disturbed me in all the right ways. And that's just totally gone. Another source of like rich conflict from the book, just being like completely glossed over. He has like 3 lines. But anyway, go on.
No, so that was just bizarre to me, that whole piece that was just like left completely unresolved and never revisited. So I don't really know why he went away in the first place. But nevertheless, Selene decides she's done. Izzy's had a complete breakdown. This isn't right for her. She can't do this anymore. To me, it makes no sense. If you're so madly in love with someone, I don't really know how you can't have a conversation about it, but okay. And she picks him up from the airport. And she's just basically like, we're done. Goodbye. It was so emotionless. I don't know if you felt that way. I was completely detached. I didn't shed a tear at all. I was just like, what? This doesn't even make sense for the context of the movie. Like, forget about the book. In the story world of this movie, this actually still doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And then she's back home. She gets the I'm outside text, which is the same text from the book, which I appreciated. And she opens the door. And instead of him telling her some variation of what's in the book of I've left the band for you, right? He instead just goes with this choice I made when I joined the band shouldn't dictate my whole life and I love you. And then they make a pact to meet in 5 years if they're still apart. Like if they're still single and still apart. Like it made zero sense. I would have so much rather him showed up like the book and been like, I've given up my whole life for you. I've left this band and I love you. And her being like, holy fuck, no, I don't want you to give up your whole life. You have so much life ahead of you to live. No. And end it the same way the book ends with her ignoring him. And then fine, if you want to flash forward 5 years in the future and give everyone that closure that many people feel like they don't have from the book and insinuate that they've reconnected in 5 years, go right ahead. Like I understand taking that creative liberty in a happily ever after sense for the screen, fine. But like completely omitting the meat of the breakup and just having it be this like glossed over, I love you, but we can't be together and we're not going to have a conversation about it. And then him just willingly leave. Like the only reason why he leaves in the book is because she literally says to him, like, it wasn't you, it was the idea of you, because she knows that that's the only thing she can say to him. That's the dagger that gets twisted, that he'll realize, like, I've lost her. Like this is not what I thought it was. And whether that was true or not, for Selene to say, she knew that was the only thing she could do to actually put that space between them. And she did it for him, right? So like that whole piece of it is completely omitted from the book. And that's something that could have been very easily added to the movie, very easily.
It was all the torture. As you're saying that, I'm just thinking all of the torture of the breakup was glossed over and like made vanilla and made very like tidy and concise. And I think that also, it's like they created like one problem piled on top of the other for themselves by making him older. When he was 20, it was like, for a 40-year-old woman and a 20-year-old man, for all the reasons in the book, it was very and shit rocky at best. Like for all these reasons where it's like, and he's doing irrational shit, like quitting the band. You know, when he came to the Paris Art Fair and is like, I'm just going to buy art so that you can come spend the day with me. You know, I think that's probably where they got the art buying scene, but they took it way too far. A 20-year-old is going to, no matter how sophisticated, is going to do irrational shit that a 40-year-old woman is not going to stand for. And she also is not going to try to kind of steal his 20s or youth. She's thinking in the book, don't do this baby fantasy with me. Like, actually, I had my kids and I'm not having any other ones. So you're going to have to go live your life. And so I think they just took the torture out of it. And shock you by saying, because I'm obviously so, like, I think Not Skinny But Not Fat, who I love, posted my review and was like, why are the reviews so harsh? It was harsh. And I feel like I stand by every word of my harshness. But do think that changing the ending is something that I forgive. Like I forgive that like epilogue, right? I forgive, or I'm more understanding of trying to give that happy ending, in fact. But I completely agree with you that all of the torture, all of the drama, and the way that it like tormented Selene to have to do it because she totally loves him, and to have to break his heart and her own heart was just like so gut wrenching in the book. It gets me every time. And you could have done so much more with that. And I think it's so interesting to hear Robin in her interviews talk about how she loves Titanic and she loves like a tortured sort of
a good cry,
tearful ending, right? And I think, yeah, it's more of a French film to have to end it and disappoint people. And it's more bold to have to disappoint people than to give them everything that they want from this story. But, you know, I think I get Hollywood making that change. Of all the changes made, that's the one that I'm sort of like, okay, I'll allow that, because I think, you know, it's pretty rough to not do a happy ending. That's the formula, you know. Rom-com, there's a happy ending. A love story, there isn't always a happy ending.
Yeah. But there's some form of closure. And I guess the way that the book ends, to show that kind of ending on screen, I think would be jarring for many viewers, because there's not really any closure. Like, unless they showed some version of Selene where she's visibly made peace with her life moving on the way it is. Like, I understand why they kind of did that. I just don't get why they completely like fucked up the breakup and made it so vanilla, as you just said. Like there was so much meat there that could have raised the stakes so much more. And then my last kind of critique, I guess, goes to the flash forward. And maybe you understood this in a different way than I did, but when she's lying on the couch, first of all, she has the same fucking manicure the entire way through the movie. So she has the same manicure for 5 years. I just would love to know what kind of gel nails she has.
Wow, I need that.
Because that was fucking insane. Anyway, but when she's lying on the couch and she's watching the Graham Norton show and Hayes comes on with his fucking soul patch, don't know why that's supposed to age him 5 years. Interesting. Why does she have like no reaction? Did you notice that? She doesn't smile. She doesn't sigh. She doesn't like look hopeful. She's completely like deadpanned, watching, unamused, lifeless, this declaration that he's coming to find her. And then she's at the art gallery and she's wearing the watch, which is really interesting actually at the end of the movie before it flashes forward when he leaves the watch again at the door as he's leaving. and she's kind of like sighing or laughing or whatever to herself. Like, I wondered the first time I watched it, I just took it as like her maybe just like reminiscing, like, what is her life that he's gone now. But then I kind of took it as, well, maybe she's like realizing he's keeping the door open because he's left the watch there for her anyway. But flashing forward, she's in the gallery wearing the watch, and he shows up and she's tearful and he's kind of tearful, and then the movie ends. I just don't really get like why she didn't have any form of an emotion when she saw him on the Graham Norton show. Like, do you have any, what was your take when watching that? Like, did you find that bizarre watching that?
I think that is bizarre. I didn't totally clock it in the moment. I was more focused on his like vampire hair and his soul patch and his soul patch. And it was kind of funny too, because like, to go back to the music and the band and stuff, you know, it wouldn't have killed you to put in like a few things about how he wanted to go solo and he wanted to be, you know, the master of his own destiny. And then you're watching him do that, and you could have been like overcome to see it happening, to see his dream happening in action. But I think like people having dreams or ambitions in this movie is not like really allowed. Her tepid response, I think, was strange too. Yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, that was sort of strange. Like, and especially when he's like, I'm going to go get my woman. She's just like, interesting. I think, you know, as you're saying that too, and the fact that she was wearing the watch in her gallery with her like IKEA art posters framed behind her, I was like, happy ending too. Now here's the thing: I love a happy ending as much as like as much as you love love stories. I really love a happy ending, and when I don't get one, I'm pretty sad about it. Like, I want one. But I think this one isn't always good for me. And I think in this case, what the reality of them really, of that really happening, of her like wearing that watch, and she's wearing it every day for the last 5 years. And like, again, this like conventionally hot white woman in Silver Lake would not have materially moved on or done anything. Like, she would just be like wearing that watch every day to work, waiting for the day that this man's going to walk in and maybe buy her inventory all over again for a second time. You know, like it's like, oh, Robin was right. It's like this, it was this like beautiful moment in time. And it was this like gut wrenchingly incredible experience, but it wasn't a long game. And so as much as I kind of like get that change, and I feel like the spirit of that change is not one like every other one that was made in service of like dulling this woman, it's still kind of like too good to be, you know, true. It doesn't feel too real. I'd be like, go shave the soul patch and then come back in and I'll think about it.
I'll think about it. Even that is too generous, thinking about it, I think. But overall, what I think is so interesting about this movie, and it's kind of like aligned with how I feel, like if I'm not thinking about the book, I think this is such a cute romance movie. Like, it's so mindless, it's so fluffy, there's no substance to it, and it's just like a cute fantasy, exactly what we talked about during that scene where he's singing to her on stage. Like, it does everything it needs to do for the movie. But when thinking about it as an adaptation of this book, it's such a disservice. And what I think is really unique about this adaptation, though, is that everyone who's a fan of the book feels some way about this. Like, they feel some similar feeling that we have, that we share. But what's really cool is that I don't think I can think of, and I was trying to think about this before we connected, like, of another book to movie adaptation where the fact that the book is not the movie is not a deterrent for people. Like, people are still watching, like me, like, it's not, the book is not the movie at all, but that's not stopping me from watching it and enjoying it when I'm watching it. And other times when an adaptation is done so off, like completely off and not right, it is distracting and horrible for me, and I can't watch it, and I think it's done so poorly. But for some reason, for me in this case, like, even though it's literally not at all the book, I still enjoy it for what it is, which I can't think of any other piece of literature that's been turned into something for the screen where I felt that way.
I think that's really, I love that you're able to do it.
She's like, not for me, but I'm good for you.
I'm not, but I do, like, I completely agree that if you didn't read the book, like, I own that my problems with the book, with the movie, come from an obsession with the book and come from all of the ideas contained in the book. I think like that's what makes me so mad. And I think like I feel like I'm thinking about other book to movie adaptations, and I'm like this. Maybe I'm just mired in this the idea of
Yeah.
you new cycle, but I'm like, is there another one that just really kind of fucked the book to
Yeah.
this
I think
extent? There
so.
are, yeah.
There
I mean, there
are.
are. It happens,
Like,
but
I
I
think
think,
one that people are really saying is like My Sister's Keeper by Jodi Picoult. Like, it couldn't be more different, I think, especially the way
mm,
that book and that movie end. And that was something that people took major issue with and like couldn't get past. And I just feel like there's
mm,
a large group of people who are obsessed with the book who are somehow, like
yeah,
me, able to just compartmentalize and be like, I fucking hate it as an adaptation. It's ass. Like, it's literally shit. It couldn't be
yeah,
more horrible as an
right,
adaptation. But like
right,
as a movie, it has legs. And that's literally how I feel. And I think that's such a weird
yeah,
thing to grapple with because I've waited for so long for this adaptation. And a part of me just feels completely like robbed of an opportunity. Like, I just feel like it was such a miss. And like maybe if this were like a mini series for HBO or like FX or something where they could push the boundaries a bit more and like have it be not a rom-com, but have it be like this tortured love story, that would have been so much better. And it's so funny. I've had like so many conversations with a billion different people about this book and this movie. And a friend of mine who's an author and also a screenwriter, I asked her, I'm like, does it exist in the world? Like, is there a career in which I can start where it's like, producers hire me on a consultation basis to make sure that adaptations are done accurately, not necessarily accurately to the book, but in a way that like will keep fans happy. Because like I think that they still could have executed this movie in this way as a rom-com from this book had they incorporated key basic elements, had they not changed Selene so much, had they kept the breakup the way it was, had they had a little more intimacy scenes. Like there was ways I
yeah,
think to keep this still a light rom-com, but not like make Selene crunchy granola weirdo artist, you know?
right.
And I just
Yeah,
feel
and
like it
I
was a
thought
missed
about,
opportunity.
yes,
Yeah.
I agree. And I think like I'm thinking about some books that I've really loved. You know, I loved Luckiest Girl Alive by Jessica Knoll, who's a friend of mine. We worked together at Cosmo, and she wrote that screenplay. And I think that yes, there are changes. There's always going to be changes, but the
Hmm.
essence of that book, the darkness, the sharpness, the sort of spiky heroine was
Yeah.
there in the movie. And even Red, White, and Royal Blue, I really love that book.
Hmm.
Like not like it's like up there with how much I love the idea of you. I love that book. And I accepted that adaptation. You know, like
Yeah.
I always think the book is written and like snappier and smarter and more clever. And I'm kind of like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But I still accepted that adaptation for what it was. And I was like, okay, like I was like okay with it. I wasn't viscerally upset by it. I
Right.
think my visceral upset, I think it really comes back to just like stories and a story like The Idea of You, the book, they're already, and especially if they're sexy, and especially if they have kind of commentary about middle-aged or 40-year-old women kind of getting theirs in every way possible, they
Hmm.
already are kind of diminished and they're like demeaned and they're called fan fiction and they're called smut and fluff and like everything that Robin writes in her timepiece, everything that Selene says about like undervaluing art by women. And I guess I feel like it's almost like too on the nose. It's too meta. It's like to have to like trash the book version so much or to have to like tread on it so much and to not take that dialogue and to not take those scenes, it just feels like more undervaluing of the book. And the book, like already, as much as it's so loved, the book and the genre that it's in gets so much of that shit that it's just like it's so depressing for the adaptation of that book to also do
Hmm.
it. It's like scratching the wound.
Yeah. No, that's very, very true. That's very true.
And I think other adaptations have just kind of been more acceptable. But I think like people like this movie, to your point. If you've like never read the book, you're just like firing this up on streaming, I would have liked it fine.
Hmm.
And I think if you like this book, like go read. I mean, if you like this movie, go read this book because
Yes.
you're gonna have your mind blown. You know,
Mind blown.
it's like if you like these elements of the older woman, if you liked her going and having a tryst with him at the hotel, you're gonna get it so much better and
Yes.
more if you just read the book.
Yes. 100%. Well, this was so much fun. I'm
It
so
was
happy
so
we
much
got to
fun.
debunk this. I mean, like, I love that we were also super aligned on our feedback, which made this even more fun, but that you definitely raised some alternate perspectives or things that I hadn't caught on before. So I really appreciate you taking the time and we getting to chat about this book. I wish it was under more like fulfilling
I wish we
circumstances.
loved it. Yeah.
Yeah. I
It
wish
would
we
be
were,
amazing to love it.
yeah,
But I also think it's okay not to. And I think you have
100%.
a pretty like balanced perspective. And I think it's okay not to. And I think it's okay to ride for it and be like, we don't. We're not, I'm not
100%.
a fan of it. And I think that's okay. And read the book. And I loved discussing this with someone who shares this undying passion for this book.
I know
It's
it's
so
like
crazy.
really
I don't like join Facebook groups about books,
me neither, but
except for
here
this
we
one.
both are. Here we both are.
Here we are.
Here we
Here
both
we are.
are.
And I
Yeah.
love it. And I
I
love
love it.
it.
I know it's truly the best book. It's the most heartbreaking book, but if anyone listening to this podcast now has only watched, sorry, the movie, like this is your time to go pick it up. I know it's like selling like hotcakes right now, which makes me so excited because if for
That's
nothing,
all I want.
exactly. Like let this, I keep saying it to Robin. I've said it to her a million times over the last 2 years. Like if nothing else, let this movie expose an entirely new audience to you and your book. And that's the biggest blessing and that's the biggest gift. And I'm loving seeing so many people on my Instagram like tagging me, being like, I got it. Like, can't wait to like cry to you. I'm like, don't worry, my DMs are open like anytime. I do it so many times
Yes.
now. I'm a vet. No good. Like all good. Yeah.
I'm like a door-to-door saleswoman proselytizer for this book. Like I can't even count the number of people that I've passed it on to. A friend had initially passed it on to me. And I think like that's how it worked. That's why it
100%.
spoke to all of us so much. And it's so fun to watch that continue. And I hope that this, benefits Robin in every single solitary
Amen.
way and that more psychos are recruited.
Amen. More hazelnuts join the crew for sure.
We welcome you. Welcome.
Welcome. We have tissues and wine.